not too long ago, I would have said it was too much for me to accomplish on my own. But that's not how I feel anymore. And that's because I have you on my side now. Lately, I've spent a lot of time thinking about how I wouldn't have made it this far without you. You and me, Teach. We can go anywhere. Do anything.
Out of all the three main lords in the game, the Giga Mind Bull himself is the least conventional in both his methods and his goals. For most of the game, his goals and his backstory aren't overtly clear, because he makes sure it stays that way. Claude is at the root a master tactician who pragmatically analyzes scenarios, and makes sure to make use of any advantage that comes his way. Claude appears to be very open and warm in conversation, but it's made clear that his attitude is oftentimes an act, even though his kind nature is definitely real. All that Claude does is in service of his dream, and the only thing that keeps him from achieving that dream is that he doesn't have the power to achieve such radical changes in the world himself. Claude is only able to fulfill his long-held ambitions when he finds power in the form of companionship with Byleth and his fellow classmates. Now, let's get into analyzing the Martin Luther King of three houses.
Are you gonna love this guy? Prince
Ali.
Ali, fabulous he, Ali Ababa.
When Byleth first meets Claude, they notice that his smile doesn't meet his eyes, indicating that he feigns positive emotions to let people's guards down. He also doesn't reveal very much about himself from the get-go. Like when Byleth asks him about himself, he'll say,
I've piqued your interest, have I? As luck would have it, I'm pretty curious about you as well. But what's life without a bit of mystery? Let's just spend the next year or so learning about each other little by little.
deflecting the question towards Byleth. Claude is also going by a fake name in Fodlan, and while it's never directly revealed in-game, the writers of the game revealed in an interview that his name is Khalid. It's interesting that Claude had the foresight to adopt a native name of Fodlan so he wouldn't face as much discrimination due to his Almiran background. Some of Claude's manipulative methods are also revealed in his support with the Hildebeest when she responds to his criticism of her manipulation by saying,
When you smile or laugh, it's not sincere. I can tell. I've only seen you genuinely smile a handful of times, like when you're talking to the professor.
Claude only takes advantage of such manipulative tactics with the goal of gaining advantages in life, because he was always taught that he was supposed to look after himself. His supports with Byleth show his development from someone who doesn't let anyone get too close into a leader who can achieve his goals by being open with his friends. His C support with Byleth deviates from the norm of most supports with them, because Byleth is the subject of the conversation here. Claude is fascinated by Byleth because it's difficult to read him and his past is unclear. However, once Byleth directs the conversation towards talking about Claude, Claude once again shifts the discussion to suggest that he and Byleth ought to stick together because of their humble upbringings. While Claude isn't too open to Byleth initially, he'll eventually warm up in his later supports, letting the player get to actually see into who he really is, but we'll get to that later. Claude has interesting relationships with Edelgard and Dimitri, where he can see their conflict with a more nuanced perspective. Claude and Edelgard agree that a new meritocratic world should be created, yet in the war phase of the game they can't work with each other because they disagree deeply on how to achieve that. Claude is frustrated with Edelgard when she's invading Garreg Mach at the end of White Clouds, and he asks her,
Isn't this much force excessive? Thanks to you, my own long-held ambitions are nearly destroyed.
It's clear that he can't get behind what Edelgard does when in the Verdant Wind route he tells Byleth that,
Honestly, I believe Edelgard is probably hoping to achieve something very similar. But her methods require too much bloodshed. That's not something the world can get behind.
Alternatively, Edelgard won't trust Claude's plan for Fodlan, because Edelgard doesn't have faith that Claude has the background necessary to lead it properly.
Your ideals. I understand they're not so far removed from my own. But without sufficient knowledge of this land's suffering, I can't entrust Fodlan to you.
Perhaps. I dare say it's true that I don't fully understand the history of Fodlan. Still, I've seen many things in my life. Don't worry, I'll finish the job for you.
After Edelgard is killed in the Verdant Wind route, Claude shows that he regretted having to kill her, in lamenting that her death
Wasn't the conclusion I'd hoped for. Even though... Never mind. It's over now.
Claude and Edelgard weren't necessarily enemies, but unfortunately Edelgard was too self-righteous to trust in Claude. Now, Claude and Dimitri have an interesting relationship that ends up being a lot like a bromance. Time and time again, Claude tries to throw Dimitri off in combat to get the upper hand by saying stuff like,
Psst, your princeliness. You got a thing for Edelgard, right? Come on, fess up, you'll feel better.
Claude, please. This is no time for idle banter. Your defenses are wide open.
That didn't get to him, huh? What a shame. I'll find a better way to ruffle him up next time.
and
Hey, your royalness. If you promise to let me have the prize, I'll let you take the honor of victory. Do we have a deal?
Enough of your foolishness. Wait a moment. You are trying to anger me, is that it?
Saw right through me, did you? Well, if there's no deal, I'll just have to win this thing fair and square.
I will happily face you here and now. Do not hold back, Claude.
But each time Dimitri realizes what Claude is trying to do, and his attempts to get in Dimitri's head ultimately fail. It's interesting because normally Claude understands how to read people and to get in people's heads, but it seems like Dimitri isn't as susceptible to that as other people. Claude especially has some difficulty reading Dimitri in the Verdant Wind route because of Dimitri's intense fixation on revenge. When Dedue comes to ask for assistance in killing Edelgard and fulfilling his debt to Dimitri, Claude comments that
He's just as hard to understand as his liege was.
But in the Azure Moon route, Claude makes a calculated decision based on Dimitri's selfless nature, and Claude acknowledges that
You and I are cut from different cloth. I wouldn't make a move unless I could gain something from it. You've always been just the opposite.
Claude seems to understand the side of Dimitri that Dimitri would present to the world, but even Claude wouldn't understand that vengeful and hateful side of Dimitri. Claude is also very different to Edelgard and Dimitri in how involved he is with the state of Fodlan. Edelgard and Dimitri survive 1 out of 4 possible routes and go down fighting until they die for their strong convictions in routes that aren't their own. However, Claude survives 4 out of 5 possible routes, including the choice to kill or spare him in Edelgard's route, because should he be unable to achieve anything in Fodlan, he'll simply return to Elmira to see his dream through, there, rather than needlessly die in the Fodlan War. And that reveals how Claude is more pragmatic than Edelgard and Dimitri, seeing the realities of a situation and refusing to commit to an unwinnable battle. There's more to Claude than his cunning strategy and his pragmatism, and when Claude interacts with Byleth and his classmates in the Verdant Wind route, he experiences some character development in becoming more trusting and understanding of a leader. Claude's supports with his classmates are interesting because they portray Claude's aptitude to poke fun at the preconceptions of students at Fodlan, while learning about some of their positive qualities in the process. Claude and Lawrence don't get along because they view each other's leadership styles as being insufficient. Lawrence thinks that Claude is too laid back and that he doesn't take leadership seriously. But that's shown to be inaccurate when Claude reveals just how thoughtful of a leader he really is when discussing the political situations of the Alliance. Claude might poke fun at Lysithia's age, but underneath that he really does respect her. It's revealed that Claude has met Lysithia's father, and that he told Claude just how proud of her he was, and that he wished she wouldn't work so hard. Claude pokes fun at her age to keep her from taking herself so seriously, and to have some fun with her. In his supports with Ignatz and Raphael, Claude comes into contact with some Fodlan preconceptions of the goddess and knighthood. Claude initially pokes fun at Ignatz's view of the goddess and Raphael's attempts to be a great knight because they're both based on Fodlan's customs. But Claude comes to realize that people like Ignatz and Raphael will do good things through the structure of Fodlan belief systems. In my opinion, Claude's 2 most compelling supports are with Cyril and Marianne. Claude's support with Cyril is an inversion of his typical supports because Claude is the one who comes into the conversation with the preconception that is subverted by Cyril's different worldview. Claude was genuinely shocked to hear Cyril's negative experiences in Elmira, and that he was now absolutely loyal to the church. Cyril points out to Claude that his goal of helping oppressed people isn't so different from Rhea's, and it causes Claude to reevaluate his previous held conceptions about the church. Finally, his support with Marianne is heartwarming because he's initially insensitive to Marianne, and her struggles because he's frustrated with her way of thinking. But he eventually decides to open up and to share his story with her, to show he can empathize with the struggles she was born into. His story establishes why he's pursuing his dream of changing the world, and how he's learned to achieve it. You can see this exceptionally well in his later supports with Byleth. In their Beast support, Claude begins to reveal more details about himself, such as why he uses every advantage he can to succeed. The reason being that his foreign birth put him in a disadvantageous position when he was younger, and he had to learn to fight his own battles, finding unique solutions to his problems. It's in his B+ support where Claude talks about his heretical religious beliefs and lets Byleth know just how important they are to him. Claude tells Byleth that his dream used to seem impossible because of how difficult it would be to achieve it. Yet, Byleth appeared in his life, providing him with the guidance and power necessary to see his dream through with a true friend by his side. Finally, in his A support, he tells Byleth just how empowered their presence has made him, and that he finally feels that he can achieve his crazy pipe dream.
Claude von Riegan.
には夢がある。
Now, Claude's dream specifically is to eliminate discrimination within the world by bringing it together, to ensure that people won't have to suffer the same isolation and discrimination that he experienced as a child in Elmira due to his foreign parentage. His dream is pretty radical and difficult to implement, and to help make his dreams feel more achievable, he would always remind himself just how small he was compared to the vastness of space, and that the world keeps on moving. Claude's dream can only be achieved with the help of others, and his A supports with Byleth and Marianne perfectly showcase his need for such support, and by the end of Verdant Wind, he comes to fully realize that his support is what got him there. This key concept of Claude's character is shown in the final fight with Nemesis when Claude gets called weak for teaming up to take him down. Claude responds with,
Yet we have the strength to scale the walls between us, to reach out our hands in friendship so we can open our true hearts to one another. That's how we win!
The line itself is kind of cheesy, but I think that it captures the themes of working together to overcome obstacles that you couldn't accomplish alone, and that it exemplifies the Golden Deer House and Claude as a character. So while Claude is a highly pragmatic leader, he's largely unable to achieve any of his long-held ambitions until he comes to believe in others to achieve his lofty ideals that would otherwise seem completely out of reach. He understands just how small and weak and alone we can all be, but despite that, we work together with others to be stronger than we ever could be. You can visibly see this nuanced understanding in Claude post-time skip when he empathetically states,
We're all desperate, aren't we?
Hey, thanks to all of you who made it this far and watched the whole video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see character analyses on Dimitri and Edelgard, feel free to do so. They're up on my channel. And feel free to subscribe to see more content, because I intend to make more character analyses. And feel free to leave suggestions in the comments below what you think. Thank you for watching, and until next time.